Have you ever thought that the creators of Chuck E. Cheese were hiding something from us all? Or have you ever found something to be off about the place? Even the creepy robotic mascots that dance on stage? I didn't find out until I found the truth about Chuck E. Cheese. It all began on the first time I ever visited the place. I was around the age of 5 or 6, so of course it was pretty ecstatic to go. Seeing all those commercials of kids eating pizza and running around without a care in the world, on the arcade games and on the play structure made me almost down on my hands and knees and beg and pleaded my mom to take me. After finally getting her to break, she took me. I was the happiest kid in the world. My mom drove me over just a few hours before evening, so maybe around 4:30 or so. I almost knocked down over the woman at the door who gave you the little stamp on your hand, running ahead of the mom and bursting through the doors like a maniac child. Eventually, I was stamped and literally screeching as I ran around all the games and play sets. After a bit, I stumbled over to a game like Whack-A-Mole, but with sharks, right by the staff-only room. I like doing this better without my headphones and glasses. One shark whacking minute later, I won the game. But before I could school in success and collect my tickets, my ears caught the sound of something very strange going on near the staff-only room. I could hear someone say, "Test number 15 on mutated rat results and angered behavior such as throwing desk and scientists at the wall." I then began to wonder what in the world they could be talking about. Maybe they were making a new game? Being so young, I had no idea what was actually going on there. So, being curious and being a little interested, I pressed myself against the door and listened as carefully as a 6-year-old could. I could hear them snapping at each other things like, "What are we going to do, the beast?" and "Get away from me!" A mumbled shout poured over whatever was in there and replied with a louder, "We can't just kill that thing! It's a beast version of our mascot!" The talking stopped. I blinked for a second and pressed myself closer to the door. I quickly realized that this was a very bad mistake. As the door opened from my weight against it, I slipped in, going from leaning on the door to falling face flat on the ground of the staff room. Immediately, footsteps scrambled over me, hands grabbing at my arms. I was out like a light in a few seconds, and still, I didn't know what the hell they did to do that. I woke up slowly, my eyes feeling heavy and my body feeling weak, in some kind of room of some sort. Irrigation room or something? A tall man with a serious expression, wearing the cleanest white lab coat I've ever seen in my life, walking towards me out of the blue. Like he knew I'd be awake. He knew I was awake. His voice was deep, and it was screechy from what I could tell. As he began to speak, he said, "You know. You know, don't you? You know," he said. I was a 6-year-old, half knocked out at a Chuck E. Cheese, so I didn't know what they expected from me. I blubbered for a second, letting my tongue function correctly. "What?" I replied dumbly, blinking hazily. He grabbed my arm, making his static feelings intensify somehow. He pulled me a bit, making me whine, though I quickly shut my toddler trap when a loud bang on the doors echoed throughout the room. Naturally, me being so young and clueless, I screamed, thrashing around. The man let go of me, snapping at me to shut my mouth. Forgetting almost everything that happened so far, I thrashed around one more time, slipping out of my chair. I kicked my legs, going into the corner of the room. I screamed again, banging my foot against something, making a loud metal clang against the foot. My foot. I twisted around and whined down at my air vent. I kicked it again out of scared hot anger. With another loud screaming clang, the metal front door popped out, again, letting out a screech when I heard the man stomping towards me out of the noise and clawing metal and banging. I scooted inside, spitting at him. I was scared of the deck. What was I doing here? Where was my mom? He swiped at me for a second, but quickly pulled the hand back. There was another loud bang, and the man stepped back. Using my tiny little hands, I grabbed the air vent's door and pulled it back, pressing it on at the door. Just in time. A piercing hiss was followed by a shout from the stranger, and the loudest bang on the door. I crawled back, scooting back to the vent, where I'd leave. Even being so young, I knew I was in trouble. I hastily turned around with a bit of struggle, slowly crawling down the vent. A loud manly screams echoed through the vent, being followed by more. They were in a union with the sound and cracking and tearing, which I now know was flesh and bone from the stranger. I got us as fast as I could. A small light was around the corner after a few minutes, and I stomped on it. The opening of the vents easily popped up. They weren't really paying attention to how tightly the screw on, were they? My feet stumbled as I climbed out, but they were soon trammeled where the last saw my mom. She was still there. With a worried expression on her face, I ran up to her, hugging her tight. My eyes were now glazed with wet, hot tears. I wanted to go home. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to go home, I whined and complained. Then my mother gave me a strange look, but put a finger on my cheek. You must be tired, sweetie, she cooed, picking me up. I clenched my small fist, holding tightly onto her shirt. We walked out of the building, me being so lovingly carried to the car. A distant whir of sirens in the distance became a bit louder and louder, and police cars pulled into the large parking lot and skidded to a halt in front of the once amazing and fun Chuck E. Cheese. My mother almost ran to the car immediately and quickly buckled me into the car seat. A couple hours later, home and safe, that night, I walked out of my room to try and get some water before I went to bed. A habit of trying to procrastinate so I didn't have to sleep. And my mother was watching the news. I tiptoed over to see what she was watching over the news, and the reporter was talking about some kind of mutated rat coming out of Chuck E. Cheese and disappearing down the alleyways. So what happened to the real Chuck E. Cheese? God only knows. But I will never, and I repeat, never, go into any damn Chuck E. Cheese restaurant for as long as I live. And I now know not to spy on the staff.